Spoiler alert! Turns out, the sun does exist in the DC Extended Universe. Literally and figuratively. Who would have thought? Hi everybody, Carla here, and this week I'm going to talk about what I told you I was going to talk about, and that is the Wonder Woman movie. I went to see it on Sunday with my family, and it was awesome! If you're wondering about that Rotten Tomatoes score, because it started off really high at like 96% or something, which is rare for superhero movies necessarily. It has now gone down to like 93, 94, I think. But if you're thinking about it in terms of comparison, the Rotten Tomatoes score might not be the best way to go about it because, well, yes, it was at one point pretty much the highest rated comic book superhero movie adaptation of them all. Now it's, I think, tied with The Dark Knight, if I'm not mistaken. Keep in mind that the Rotten Tomatoes score does not say anything. A better indicator might be the rating the movie gets from the critics. So if you compare the 94 from The Dark Knight to the 94 from Wonder Woman, you will see that The Dark Knight is about 1 whole point better rated than Wonder Woman. So in that sense, Wonder Woman is not necessarily the greatest movie of all time. It's not even necessarily the greatest superhero movie of all time. But it's a great movie, it's entertaining, it's hard-hitting, it's kind of very timely in the sense that I walked out of the theater thinking, oh my god, I needed a movie like this right now in my life. And it's really thrilling for everybody, not just for women. So I really want to talk about it in depth. Of course, as it often happens with my movie reviews, there will be spoilers, so be warned. If you haven't seen this movie, 1, please go and watch it as soon as possible, and 2, don't come back to watch this video until after you've watched the Wonder Woman movie. It really is one of those movies that I think everybody should watch. Whether you have any interest in female-led movies, whether you care at all about DC, or even if you don't care at all about DC. Even if you don't like Wonder Woman as a character, I think this is a movie that everybody should watch just because of the feeling it gives you, regardless of who you are and what your priorities are. So keep that in mind that there will be spoilers. I'm not holding back on anything that happens in the movie. So if you haven't seen it yet, please pause now, go watch it, and then come back to watch this video.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger! No, Will Robinson! Danger!
So let me start. First, I'm gonna talk about the effects and the costume design, because as usual, when it comes to superhero movies, this is kind of a big deal, right? A lot was made up about whether Wonder Woman and her quote-unquote skimpy superhero outfit deserve to be, I don't know, lauded for some reason. I don't particularly have any problem with Wonder Woman's outfit. I think if it's comfortable for her to fight in it, great. I don't care that it's a mini skirt. I didn't even care when it was like hot pants. She can wear whatever the hell she wants, okay? That's how it is. I do have a problem, however, when the outfit is impractical rather than skimpy, because skimpy I don't give a shit about, but if it's impractical for her to fight in, I have questions. Not necessarily that it's a bad thing, because sometimes I can suspend my disbelief, but my mind goes to questioning things all the time in movies that aren't even supposed to be realistic. So it's gonna happen with Wonder Woman. I have no problem with the skirt. I think the skirt is actually great because it allows her a better range of movement. I'm still not convinced by the corset because it feels to me that if you're wearing a corset, you're limiting your mobility. In the movie itself, though, it seemed like she had no problem moving with a corset. It didn't necessarily look like it was too tight or anything. that would restrict her torso movements or anything like that. And it did look like armor, so I'm good with the costume in general. The period costumes in this movie were so good. I especially like Diana's clothing because it felt like, you know, an early 20th century clothing. But it was also kind of fashionable, so I really like that. It all felt like it was early 20th century London, right? So I have no problem with the costume. I actually thought it was really good. I loved her hats. As far as the effects go, the CGI was kind of iffy in some parts, particularly when she was fighting, and you could sort of see that at one point it was real Diana, and then like a second later she would turn into CGI Diana, and then back to real Diana, and it was a little bit too obvious. Like, I remember my cousin and I were sitting there, and she was like, it's the curse of being a millennial, and you can immediately tell that stuff. Nothing ever looks real in movies anymore, and it's not necessarily the fault of the CGI. It's us, because we are used to that CGI in movies, and our eyes can pick it out now. It doesn't fool us. So that part bugged me a bit. I also, and this is going to sound really blasphemous, I guess, but I didn't like the look of the lasso. I just didn't. It had that thing that they did in the original Star Wars movies, you know, with the lightsabers, and they kind of sort of palpitated a little bit, and it was just because the effects of an actual lightsaber weren't advanced enough at that point. So in my head, that sort of palpitation thingy felt fake, precisely because I flashed back to original lightsabers in Star Wars, and it felt dated to me. And the lasso sort of did something like that. It had these palpitations in its bright, shiny light that came out of it. It kind of palpitated a bit and made me think about that. And it didn't feel like it had any weight. Like, you see somebody using a whip or throwing a rope, there's a weight to it. Not too much, obviously, but there are physics to it. And at some points when she used the lasso, I was like, it doesn't look like a real thing, like a real material thing that is happening. It just looks like energy whipping from side to side, and I didn't like that. So the lasso was not my favorite part. I like the way they used it. I like the way that they used it in the plot, and I like the way that she used it as a whip to fight. That was actually really cool. I just didn't like the look of it. And just let us not talk about that ending. Like, that ending looked like the final scene with Ares. It looked like it had been filmed by Zack Snyder rather than Patty Jenkins. And that's not a knock on Zack Snyder. He's a good director. His movies make a lot of money. People obviously like his stuff. He has his audience. I'm just not part of it. I don't like his style. And this is even before Batman v Superman, by the way. I didn't like his style in Watchmen. I didn't like his style in 300. People were so excited about 300 and the way it looked, and I was just like, no, it doesn't appeal to me. It looks weird. It looks overly stylized, and I don't like it. And while I can understand why Zack Snyder sticks to it because it's his thing, I wish that Patty Jenkins hadn't gone there trying to sort of match Wonder Woman to the rest of the extended universe in that sense. It looked different from the rest of the movie, and it bugged me. And again, we're back to this thing where superhero movies sort of devolve into giant CGI epic fests in the last battle, and it loses all its sense of humanity, all its sense of reality, all its sense of real stakes, you know, in a way, because everything looks so supernatural and so otherworldly that you kind of really stop caring. So that bugged me, as far as the CGI goes, especially. As far as cinematography and tone, I think, well, first of all, can I just say that the entirety of the scenes on Themyscira were lovely. I mean, that location was so gorgeous, just looking at the landscapes and the brightness and the sun. It's so good to see the sun in a DC movie. It looks so beautiful that oh my god, I could watch an entire movie just on Themyscira for sure. And it helped in a way that even the London scenes, which were obviously a lot more dreary. That was actually a plot point in the movie. They were a bit more dreary, but it made the difference visually interesting, in a sense that Diana was coming out from this really colorful, bright, open world into something a lot more constrained, more mechanized, more depersonalized in a sense. And it was an interesting contrast to see. So I didn't mind the fact that London was foggy and dark and gray, because it was a good visual way to represent that Diana is not in her world anymore. Patty Jenkins used a lot of slow-mo, which I normally don't like, but this time I feel that it wasn't distracting. It actually rather enhanced this incredible fight choreography that they used. I mean, just thinking back to the fight at Themyscira at the beach, the way she used the slow-mo just to let us see what the stunt women and the Amazons were doing, how they were fighting, was great. I really enjoyed that, even if it was slow-mo, because again, I'm not fond of fight scenes, but when they are so beautifully choreographed, like in Deadpool, for example, which had some really great fight choreography, even though it was low in CGI, when they are so beautifully choreographed, I want to see that. I don't want a lot of fast cuts that don't let me see what is actually happening, because I get lost easily, okay? I don't follow fight scenes as much. My brain can't follow. So I like seeing the movements that they chose, what was happening to everybody, and the slow-mo did help in that regard, so I like that. The thing that stuck with me the most as far as cinematography goes in this movie was just the camera angles. I don't know who was the director of cinematography in this movie, but whoever they are, he or she and Patty Jenkins deserve so much credit, because this movie used so many incredible non-standard angles to like see all the fight scenes from above and from around, and changing angles while she was jumping. That scene was really great, by the way. And for me, really, that was sort of the greatest triumph of Patty Jenkins' directing. She didn't just make a serviceable movie, she made an exciting movie. She made a visually stunning movie, and the cinematography and the camera angles helped so much with that. I think she did an amazing job when it came to that. She really has amazing vision as to what she wants her final product to look like, and that was amazing to me, because she's coming from Monster, which is a great movie, and it got Charlize an Oscar, but it wasn't necessarily an action flick, right? So you had to be a little bit worried, in a sense that maybe she wasn't sure how to handle action, but hey, whoever she brought on board and whatever she studied up on to really put these action scenes in a very visual way worked. So I'm really glad, and that was my biggest conclusion after I came out of the movie. It was that Patty Jenkins is a hell of a director. My favorite scene in the entire movie, though, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way, is the no man's land scene, because this scene was amazing from beginning to end. Just the way that she decides that she's not going to wait to save people and just appease war conventions of the time. She's going to do something about it, even if it takes her putting herself at the front line of the attacks. And she just walks up that ladder and stands there, and just the way the camera pans over to her, it doesn't linger on her body, it lingers on her determination, her feet, her hands, her face, her expression. And she stands there, and then she starts running. Oh man, I'm getting chills again. She just starts running. She doesn't care, and they start aiming at her, and she's deflecting, and she's got the shield, and then Trevor and the guys just sort of join her because they obviously realize, hey, this is working, let's go. And it's just an amazing scene from beginning to end. I can understand. I'm not a very emotional person. I'm not the type to like cry or anything, but when I watched that movie, I genuinely understood why so many people on social media were saying, oh my god, I cried so hard when I saw that, because it felt so triumphant. It felt like nothing we have really ever seen in a superhero movie before, and it was amazing. And that's got as much to do with the story itself as it has to do with the way Patty Jenkins presented that scene, and that is amazing to me. She is incredible. I will never forget the name of Patty Jenkins in my life, because I feel that she's got such a vision, and this scene was the best part of that vision for sure. And most of all, I just like the overall hopeful, idealistic tone that the movie had. It was so nice, because we've seen so many superhero movies by now. We've seen all over the spectrum of idealism versus cynicism, and I understand why we've taken a turn lately towards more cynical movies. Not cynical in a bad sense, but more like we're taking the superheroes that seemed so pure and so innocent and so one-dimensional in the past, and we're turning them around so we can then make them more real, and making them more real involves being a little bit grittier, a little bit darker. I understand that. That makes sense to me. At the same time, we are in a place when it comes to superhero movies where we're sort of aiming for that grittiness. And while that's good in a sense that it rounds the characters a little bit more than we have seen in the past, at the same time you don't want to lose what makes them a superhero in the first place, and that is faith in humanity and strength and courage and determination, and just this need that they have, this almost involuntary desire they have to protect people and to fight for goodness. And I think we're losing a little bit of that in our eagerness to make the characters so well-rounded. And that almost feels a little bit heavy-handed with the state of the world right now. I mean, so many bad things and negative things are happening all over the world. I said this before, this is why I don't go to like the movies to watch horror movies, because I don't go to the movie theater to suffer. It's the same thing. If we're already bombarded with so many negative, dark, gritty, no black and white, just pure gray stuff outside in our real world, I would like to go to the movies and escape that a little bit. I understand the movie has to make sense, the character has to be well-rounded, but don't just go to the entire opposite end of the spectrum of idealism, because then it's not fun anymore, you know? And while I don't, I'm not bashing DC, by the way, this is in general for all movies. I think there are some superheroes that lend themselves to that grittiness a little bit more. You have your Batmans, your Iron Mans, your Deadpools, your Wolverines. They lend themselves to that a little bit more because they were that way in the comics. When you have characters like Superman and Captain America and Wonder Woman, you want to have a little bit of that hope for humanity that they are supposed to have. Yes, Superman should not be a Boy Scout, but he should also not be debating whether it's a good idea to save people. You know what I mean? I haven't seen BVS, so it's not a commentary on that movie. But it's just, in a general sense, you have to keep the essence of the superhero that you're dealing with. And that was very good for me about Wonder Woman, because it's so nice in this world that is so messed up right now, where so many horrible things are happening. It's so nice to go into the theater and watch a superhero movie that truly believes in the basic tenets of what a superhero should be. And Wonder Woman is that. Again, she's not the Boy Scout type or Girl Scout. In this case, she does realize by the end of the movie that there is darkness in human beings as well. They're not just good. It's not some sort of external force acting on them. But she will still fight for the good side. She would still fight, because as long as there's goodness, that goodness deserves to be saved and deserves to be celebrated. And that's what I feel that this movie did. I walked out of the theater feeling like my faith in humanity was restored a little bit, which is great, because these are trying times that we're living in, and I appreciate that from this movie so much. It's so great to see it happen. As far as the story and pacing of the movie, I know some people have problems with the pacing. I honestly didn't. I like that the fight scenes were well distributed in the movie, and even the slower scenes in between didn't feel draggy. They just felt like we were getting to know the characters better, so I enjoyed that. I do think there were some predictable elements, so yeah, I didn't like that necessarily. And it almost felt like, let's go to war! It was like really freaking easy. You know, it's let's just go to the front. It's not that easy. You know, it's just not. So that bugged me. But I did like that the entire plot revolved around Diana's mission to kill Ares. And I like that they managed to do that in a way that turned up to be that she wasn't entirely right, but she wasn't entirely wrong either. So I like that broad storyline through the movie entirely. As far as the characters and the acting goes, Gal Gadot had a few lines that I feel could have been delivered better, particularly in Themyscira when she was arguing with her mother about whether she should go away and fight Ares and destroy him. A few of those lines didn't land right to me, but for the most part, Gal Gadot did great. I know a lot of people out there don't think she's a great actress. I think she can play to her strengths, though. I mean, I wouldn't expect her to be a Meryl Streep or anything, but she is good with what she's given in this movie. She's great, and I especially liked her in scenes when she was passionately defending her views of mankind. Like when she was arguing with Steve about, you know, what was happening and whether he was good or not. I liked that. And I also especially liked her when she was just appalled by the horrors of war. I thought that was really genuine of her, because it should be, really, for anybody. So I like that. One of the things that I love about this movie as well is that Diana is innocent and maybe even a little bit naive because of the way she's been raised, but she doesn't come across as dumb. She knows how to read people, and she understands things straight away when they're explained to her. And a lot of people have been comparing this movie to Thor because they both have that similar sort of fish out of water theme. You know, somebody comes from a different world and comes to ours and doesn't understand anything. But I feel like this movie was less Thor and more Captain America, in the sense that Captain America did not understand modern world, but his learning curve was like really steep, and he managed to do it because he was smart, he understood things, whereas Thor was a little bit not less intelligent, but a little bit slower in his understanding. He was a bit more fixed on his way of thinking than Cap, and I feel Diana was sort of like Captain America in that sense. So I quite enjoyed that, because we don't have to know everything, we don't have to understand everything, we just have to get it when it's explained to us, and that is okay. And for Diana, that doesn't make her any less of a strong character just because she doesn't understand these things. So I enjoyed that. Now I was telling my friends before I watched the movie, because they were complaining about Chris Pine, and I was like, nope, Chris Pine is always 100% the best part of any movie that he's in. And now that I've seen the movie, I realize that this is not the exception. Don't get me wrong, this was Gal Gadot's movie, for sure. But Chris Pine gave it that emotional hook, in a sense. And he is so good. Every time I look at him in his eyes, it's like he's so sincere about everything that he's doing. And I love that. I adore Chris Pine. I don't care. My cousin was complaining that he's been in too many movies. I don't care. Have Chris Pine in all the movies. I think he's great, and I think he doesn't get the recognition he deserves because he's such a great actor. He's amazing. Speaking of Steve Trevor, though, he was just cocky enough to make me smile, because I like some cockiness. It makes things a little bit interesting. But I liked that he also didn't necessarily consider himself a good person either. He knew that he had done things that weren't right. He knew that his actions had caused people to die as well, because this was war and it was what he had to do to save the majority of the people from the German threat. But the fact that he knew that he had committed atrocities as well, it made it really come across that he was good, especially because Diana understood it. So if Diana, who's like an icon of goodness, understands that the things he did was because he had to, it emphasizes the point that, hey, you're not perfect, but you're actually overall a decent human being. And he's humble to boot, so I really enjoyed Steve. As far as the Amazons go, oh my god, I loved Connie Nielsen's Hippolyta so much. She was so great. I mean, on the one hand, she was regal and she demanded attention wherever she went, but at the same time, she was also like soft and caring and treated her subjects as equals. And at the same time, she was also sort of like afraid to let her daughter grow up on her own, and she was like slightly controlling of her and what she could do. So she was very well rounded, in my opinion. She also had some of the best lines of the movie, which I loved. The whole "you've been my greatest love and my greatest sorrow" line was great. Just that entire scene and the whole thing about how the world of man doesn't deserve Diana. She had some great lines, and you might think they're cheesy, but she sold them, man. Connie Nielsen is so great. Robin Wright's Antiope, pretty much the epitome of badass, okay? She was so great. I hate that she had to die. I've been hearing rumors that apparently she's going to be in Justice League, I assume in some kind of flashback, because she's, dead. But I would love to see her in anything. Like, she should play Antiope in everything ever. So I'm good with that. I really love the representation on Steve Trevor's group as well. I like that they had characters from different races and different backgrounds. I really liked them, especially Sammy, who was like funny and adorable, and I loved him. And the Chief as well. With his background and the way he related to Diana as well. One particular thing that I loved about the Chief was that, and this is really small, but it stood out to me so much when it happened, the fact that he's so well liked in the war front. He would walk and everybody would be like, "Hey Chief, you're back!" And it just made me smile, because these people did not have hang-ups. Anybody who's fighting alongside them is a friend, and that's great. I like Charlie too, but I feel like his whole PTSD subplot sort of got cut off. It just sort of went nowhere. He had that one scene where he couldn't shoot, but then it felt like there was no payoff for that. So I wish they could have done a little bit more about that. The villains were a bit blah, which is something that tends to happen in superhero movies, honestly. So I wasn't shocked or anything. But, as a chemist, I couldn't help but really like Dr. Maru. I wish they had given her a little bit more to work with. Like, I wish they had done a little bit more with her. Because then she came back in the ending fight, like the big fight at the end. And it sort of came out of nowhere. It felt a little bit disjointed. We never really knew what happened to her either. So I wish they had done more with her. But I liked her. I liked seeing a woman in that position. Pretty much have in her hands the entire reason why the Germans would have been able to win the war had this succeeded. So it would have been thanks to her. Not that that's a good thing, but it's good seeing a woman in that sort of position. As far as shipping goes, Gal Gadot and Chris Pine had some real chemistry. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thought this way. You could really see how their relationship grew through the time that they spent together, and it's so refreshing to see a relationship come out of mutual respect that I really enjoyed it. Their chemistry was great. I like that it was subtle too. It didn't take over the rest of the movie, but it worked for both of their characters' individual storylines, and then together it just worked really well, so that was good. That said, I'm just gonna mention some negatives because, again, no movie is perfect, and this is not the exception. I really enjoyed this movie, but there were some things that I didn't like. For example, the heiress reveal, I saw that coming a mile away. And it has a lot to do with that, that whole the one guy you recognize is always the big bad principle. Because seriously, you don't cast David Thewlis as some random politician staying out of the limelight whose only purpose is to cheer on his covert team via telephone. No, David Thewlis is too big a name for that. So I really always assumed that the General Ludendorff was a red herring. It was kind of obvious that he was, and if it wasn't him, then who was it? It had to be somebody surprising. So as soon as he came on screen, I was like, oh, he's going to be Ares. Great. I also called the sword is not the god killer thing. Although that took me a little bit longer. It was near the scene where it was revealed when I was like, oh, it's not the sword. She's the god killer. I get it. So at that point, when Ares was talking and explaining to Diana, and she went "Brah," and the sword broke, and Ares was like, oh, you don't get it. I'm like, it's not the sword. It's you, Diana. Even before I said it, and my cousin was like, oh, shut up, don't spoil it. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. It was kind of obvious after a while. Other things that I didn't like, the CGI in general, like I mentioned before. The big CGI battle at the end, that was also blah. And also, I just kind of sat there thinking, there were a ton of soldiers in this base. Where are they? And are they not seeing what is happening right now? Because there's this thing in armor that is blowing up stuff. And then you have this woman who randomly appeared out of nowhere and suddenly she can fly. Why are people not watching this? Like, how is Diana not a big deal everywhere after this fight? So that bugged me. And of course, again, the villains were very generic for the most part. So that's kind of my biggest disappointments with this movie, but it's, comparatively speaking, it's not a lot of things. So I still enjoyed this movie, and I still think it's pretty great. Now, I have to talk about the feminism side of this, because I do consider myself a feminist, and I feel like this is an important movie for the cause. So I have to talk about it. Sorry if you don't like it, but it's my vlog, whatever. I've seen people complaining that the movie is too feminist. I've seen people complaining that the movie's not feminist enough. For me, it was just right. It was a good movie for the feminist cause. And for me, I think the best part of it is just what Wonder Woman is in the movie and what the movie itself represents outside of the canon. Patty Jenkins said in an interview not too long ago, while she was promoting the movie, she said, Wonder Woman is not a feminist hero. And she got bashed a lot for that, honestly. But I feel like I understand what she meant to say, and to a point I agree. Because Wonder Woman, at least as she is in this movie, she's not a feminist. She's not fighting for female equality, mainly because she doesn't even realize that there's no female equality in our society. She doesn't, the thought doesn't even really cross her mind that anybody might think that female and males are not equal. Technically speaking, Wonder Woman, again, at least in the context of this movie, she comes from a post-feminist society, and she comes with a post-feminist mindset. So she's not fighting for equality. She's not a feminist hero. She's not joining in that fight. But she's a hero to feminists anywhere because, one, she's the first major female comic book superhero lead that we've had. And this is the first major superhero movie that has been directed by a female director as well. So in that sense, this movie and this character is important to feminists because of that milestone. But in her own mind, Diana is not a feminist hero. She's not fighting for equality, but she's proof of the fight for equality and the push for equality in our world outside of the movie's universe. Also, can we just put to rest this idea that female-led movies don't make money? I mean, sure, Wonder Woman made a lot of money, and a lot of people are gonna say, oh, it's because of the hype, or whatever. It's really not. It's not a particular surprise that Wonder Woman is a big deal, But it also shouldn't be a surprise when we've had, the Ripleys and the Cunners and 4 movies of Katniss Everdeen that all made a ton of money. So this idea that movies led by females don't make money, this is like 20 years ago. Okay? It's not a thing anymore. I think we can just confirm that already. But the important thing about Diana and feminism for me is that this sort of post-feminism way of thinking that Diana comes with in this movie is also a lesson to both feminists and non-feminists in the real world of what feminism is fighting for. Because there are so many different definitions of feminism nowadays. Everybody thinks they know what it is. But what it comes down to is equality. Feminists want women to be equal to men, to be treated equal, to be legally equal in the entire context of the word. And that is why Diana is important as a character, because she's not fighting for feminism herself, but she reminds us of what feminism is fighting for. She comes from a world, and this is especially prevalent in the sense that she comes from a world that is fully inhabited by women. She had never met a man up until the beginning of this movie. She had never met a man. But when she finally does meet a man, it doesn't even cross her mind to think that he might be inferior to her, or that they are anything less than equals, and she never treats him that way. And that is what we should aspire our world to be. Of course, in the case of Diana, it's reversed. It's women not thinking they're superior to men, because that's what the story of Wonder Woman is. But it does teach us a lesson of what any gender should think about the other gender, or any other genders, because we know that gender is a spectrum. But just that this idea that genders shouldn't be pitted against each other. They should just basically understand that we are all equals. And that's what Diana teaches us in this movie. And that's why she is a hero for feminism, because that's where feminism wants to get. That's what we should aspire our world to be, really. Because when you see quotes in this movie, not necessarily by Diana, but by the Amazons, for example, Hippolyta saying, "Be careful in the world of man," that is less about males than it is about mankind. It's really anything that isn't your world, where you grew up and where you feel safe, you have to be careful about. Not in the sense that they have a Y gene and that's why you shouldn't trust them. No, it's about mankind, and that mankind might not be as pure and as supportive as the Amazons. So even lines like that some people who are not feminists might actually bristle at, in the context of the movie and from the acting of Connie Nielsen in this case, actually you can see that they are understood differently. It's not pitting women against men or men against women in any way. And you have a lot of subversion of typical male-led moments in movies. For example, that scene at the beginning when Diana rescues Steve from the water and brings him to the beach and just looks down at him. It's the Little Mermaid. It's a gender switched Little Mermaid moment, and it was great. It's fantastic. And that whole scene when Trevor is taking a bath and Diana comes in and sort of stares, and the conversation they have is something that happens a lot with women in male-led movies. And it's good to see that switch, that gender flip of tropes and conventions in most other movies in this movie, precisely because the lead was a female and you have to switch things around. That was very refreshing. In the end though, I feel like it was a very balanced story. Yes, Diana was the lead, and yes, the story centered around her, but Steve Trevor also had some amazing moments of heroism and leading, and they had a lot of mutual respect. And they both knew what their respective strengths were, and they played to them so that they could take this mission that they had together and achieve it. So it's less about feminism and more about post-feminism and what the world should be once feminism's goal is achieved. In a world in which no gender is above the other, but rather both men and women can work together, playing to each other's strengths in order to make the world a better place. And it's interesting because one of my favorite lines in the entire movie was when they save the village after this whole scene in no man's land and then in the village, which was amazing. They save the village and Trevor sits down by Diana and he tells her, hey, you did this. And she turns to him and replies, we did this. Which is great because they're a team. Again, Diana's never thinking that, she's better than the rest or that they're not helpful to her. It's a team effort. And that is the main thing I got from this movie. This idea that we can achieve a world where men and women are equal. And that is what feminism is fighting for, in a sense. So when you hear people say, oh my god, this totally revitalized my feminism. Yes, it did. Not because of what Wonder Woman is, but because of, one, what the movie represents for females, especially in Hollywood, where the inequality is so blatant, but also because of the themes that she teaches us as a character, and they teach us together as characters. So I thought that was really great. Now I'm babbling, so I will go straight to my conclusion now. Again, like I said at the beginning, this is not the best superhero movie ever by any means. I mean, it was great. It was really entertaining. Definitely a triumph for female-led and female-directed movies. But as an origin story, it's not particularly groundbreaking. So it's not that it's like the best movie ever. But it's definitely the best DC Extended Universe movie by far. Now, I didn't see BBS, but I trust the critical reception, and I trust the opinion of my friends when they talk about it. So I'm gonna say yes, this is definitely the best DC Extended Universe movie we've had so far. And that's not to say that it should stay the best. I hope that future DC movies are great. I can't wait for Justice League now. I really want to see that. For now, it's the breath of air that the DC Extended Universe really needed to demonstrate that, hey, we can't do this. We can't. So that's fantastic. And, even if you have no stake in the whole feminist debate and the importance of this movie for feminism, go watch it because it's a very pure movie. It's a movie that reminds us that we should see the good in mankind, and that we should, as should our superheroes that we admire, we should defend the goodness of humanity without a doubt and without fear for the consequences to our own lives. We should just defend whoever needs to be defended because that's the right thing to do. And I think that's the greatest conclusion I can get from this movie. I walked out of the theater just feeling so light and so positive. And I really think everybody should go watch it just because of that. Even if you don't want to get into the whole feminist debate, go watch it because it will make you feel better about the world, and that's a good thing. So, yep, that's about it from me today. I don't know what I'll be talking about next week. Maybe it might be a review of The Dark Prophecy by Rick Riordan, which is in the Trials of Apollo series. I'm reading the book right now and I'm going relatively fast, so I may have it done by next week. I'm not making any promises though. But as always, if you have any topics that you would like me to talk about, drop them in a comment. If it's anything that I have any knowledge of, I'll make sure to add it to my list of videos to make in the future. In the meantime, you can find me on social media. I am on Twitter and Instagram at girlssoweird with underscores between the words, and I am on Tumblr at girlssoweird with hyphens between the words. You can find a Facebook page for this vlog at facebook.com/FreakingNarnia, and as usual, be sure to visit my main website at FreakingNarnia.com. All my videos are there in case you want to catch up or you missed anything. Also, please make sure to stop by my Redbubble store where I make art for my favorite quotes from my favorite fandoms, and then you can use that art to print on all sorts of merchandise such as t-shirts and coffee cups and computer covers and stuff like that. I'm always adding new stuff, so please go check it out and maybe purchase something if you're in the mood. And as a last note, remember that I am now uploading these videos as podcast episodes. I only have like 4 episodes up but I will be catching up soon, hopefully, if work allows. But you can find it in iTunes and Stitcher. If it's more convenient for you to hear these episodes as podcasts, be sure to look that up. And that's about it from me today. I will see you next Friday with another video from all the way in freaking Narnia. I will now proceed to go and buy all the Wonder Woman merchandise, because I have no control over myself. Bye! The sun does exist in the DC Extended Universe. I don't care that it's a mini scare. There is like, oh, you know, nothing major comic book superhero movies that comic gender is